following the pathway of avoiding sin. Look at verse 12. Forgive us our debts. What? Forgive us. When Jesus instructed us to ask God to forgive us, it's a declaration that we believe that we've sinned. His laws have been broken by our choices. We confess He's the one in charge and we're not. We're sinners. He's holy. We sin against Him and others. And only He can cleanse that away. That's what this pathway of avoiding sin is. A decreasing frequency of sin, an increasing frequency of avoiding it by His grace. You say, how do you do that? Titus 2. The grace of God that brought salvation teaches us to deny ungodliness and worldly lusts. That's paddling against the current. Each day, I need to say that I choose to lay aside those besetting sins because of your grace. God wants us to love Him more than our temptations that constantly come our way, and God wants us to take the pathway of avoiding sin, and that leads us to the first part of verse 13. It's the pathway of obeying God. Notice what verse 13 says, and do not lead us. Emphasis on lead. If we're being led, it's the pathway of obeying God. And so what we're saying is, as you lead me and throw into my box trial after trial after trial after trial, emotional and financial and relational and spiritual and every other kind, when you throw those in, I want to obey you. And I want you to lead me right out of ruinous temptation to sin and right into discovering how faithful you are. The pathway of obeying God. The only way to be delivered from the evil one who prowls around and seeks to devour us is by following the pathway God has given us. We have to obey Him. We follow our faithful God away from the ruinous ditch of yielding to temptation that leads to sin. We follow our powerful God into the way of believing that He is strong, and we stand against the wiles of the devil, which leads us right back to the last half of the verse 13. It's the path of humbling ourselves. It's the path of saying, it's all about you. It's not about me. Thine is the kingdom. Thine is the power. Thine is the glory forever. It's you. The longing of our hearts as Christ followers is that God get all the credit. We want God to get the glory. We want Him to get the honor. As we sang this morning, do your name. That's what we say forever. When we see ourselves in the future around the throne in Revelation 4 and Revelation 5 and Revelation 11, we're doing the chief end of man. We're glorifying God. We're magnifying Him. So each day we make sure our life is pointing at God as our Father. Each day we make sure we're following the pathway of magnifying Him, which leads us to choose to humble ourselves. Humility is a garment we put on by choice each day. The last petition is a choice to clothe ourselves with humility. God wants us to follow the path of humility by returning to the one that we adore His character so much that all glory and honor is due to Him. And so our Father that we focus on is the one that we humbly empty ourselves and bow before. That's the pathway. Jesus wrote it for His disciples. And He said, this is what I want you to do every day. Not mindlessly repeat this, but intentionally say, I need to worship. I need to surrender. I need to follow you. I need to trust you for what I need to make it through today, keeping clean from all the sins against others and against you, and asking for your protection. And emptying myself so that you get all the glory. Remember when the spotlight was on Daniel at the big banquet and the king called him and said, we understand you can answer this handwriting on the wall stuff. Do you remember what Daniel said? I can't, but there is a God in heaven. That's emptying ourselves. We still do the same thing. We perform for His glory. Let's all stand together. And as we stand, at the beginning, I said, we're followers of Christ or we're not. You've been thinking about that. You've been hearing about that. But are you? today following Christ. Maybe at a distance. Maybe you're sporadic. Maybe you're right on the bumper. Maybe you don't even know what that means. If you don't know what that means, last week I said, hey, if you want to come know the Lord, if you aren't sure you know him, there are people right here at the front. Boom, someone came right up to me. And I said, I have to go to the visitor line. They said, I'll follow you. And they got there, and there were 3 elders. And this person said, I don't think that I know Christ. You should have seen him spring into action. One got tracts, Bible. We surrounded him, shared the gospel. Did you know if you'd like to make sure that you know the God who's only an arm's length away, he's here, he's in your box, he's in your striker vehicle, and he would like to make sense of everything happening to you. But the first way is to get your eyes opened when you call out to him by faith and say, I'm a sinner, I want my own way. You died for sinners, I want a new heart. And you start coming to know your Father in heaven.